Go live, Robert.
Hi.
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 Um,
Hi, Hopi.
hi.
Hi,
We've
everybody.
been already talking, so we'll just bring you in on this conversation. Two people noodling, father daughter. When you change, the whole world around you changes, right?
Right.
Right. And we were talking about stories of something that keeps coming up with my conversations with my father and other women, which is needing to fit in and the sense of feeling like you've got to be the good girl or good boy, and how that carries through in your life. So my father was reminding me of when I was a teenager, and being a teenager, for those of you who have kids, and for those of you who were teenagers, which is all of you pretty much, is remember that drive of feeling like you need to fit in, feeling like you need to be part of the pack,
Except your family.
except your family. And what you do to fit in, what you manipulate, whether it's like internal manipulation of quieting your voice, of your opinion, to trying on different versions of yourself to fit in with other people, to doing weird and crazy, sometimes dangerous things, sometimes risky things that will cause you harm just so you can belong. And I'm sure it happens for many when they're younger than being a teenager, but being a teenager is really a formative time of we can all remember feeling like you want to belong. And we're usually at school as well at that time. And we're usually surrounded by ways of reminding us that you'll get rewarded if you fit in.
Mm,
Right?
right.
I
There
mean,
is a good, well, fitting in
yeah,
gets you accepted and gives you status. And if you don't, you're one of them.
right.
You're
And
an
what is one of
outsider.
them? One of them is like, it's like
You don't
those
want to be
myths
one of them.
where you don't go beyond the gate, because beyond the gate, then you're going to get eaten by monsters. You don't misbehave. Although you and I were talking about the ones, us, the good boy, the good girl who are compliant and do what is expected. Sometimes that's not always the best in
Well,
going through life.
sorry, there is going to be dog. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the issue about being the good fitting in is corporal punishment in this house. In fitting in is that it can work up to a certain point, but if you make fitting in and being good to putting other people's opinion of you first,
Mm,
and that becomes a habit of a lifetime, it can become the reason why many people wake up one day and feel, I don't even know who I am anymore because I'm exhausted by complying with the expectations of other people, of being a good girl.
right.
And then one of the responses that we're seeing a lot of, and Hope and I talked about this, is there are people saying, particularly women, okay, enough. I'm putting up my boundaries and I'm going to say no a lot.
Right.
And I wanted us to talk a little bit about there's a better way than this because there's something going on that we're once you see, you can see it, but if you haven't seen it, you don't even know it's there. But understanding this missing thing can practically help you make a better life for yourself. And that is every relationship you have. So, Hope talked about the teenager.
Mm,
There are a set of rules. There's a contract that teenagers have with each other
yeah.
about fitting in or not. And most of us take this set of rules about fitting in. It comes from school. If you don't obey the teacher and if you don't do the work that she wants you to do, you get either labeled one of them or you get bad marks. So you're absolutely not rewarded. So
Right.
you're trained at school to be obedient
Hmm.
and to play. There's a contract here, because if you win the contract, you get a good mark, and with good marks, you get a piece of paper that enables you to go to another institution of so-called learning, where the same thing happens again, but it's at a higher level. It's called university, which
Hmm.
enables you to get another piece of paper to enable you to have a job.
Right.
But if you look at the contract of school, university, and job, it's one where I have to give up control over when I get up in the morning, what I do all day, when I go home, when I have free time. I give up control of almost my whole life for an illusory stream of continuing money coming in. I say illusory because you can lose your job at any time.
Right.
And that is what is oppressing people.
I
And
just, sorry to interrupt you. I just got off a call with probably about 100 women who were talking about their life changing, trying to recognize moving from, say, when they were younger, achieving, to going into becoming, to a later stage. And this feeling of moving from stage to stage and having completely lost the plot in where they're going or who they are or what they want.
yeah,
And I think being in this track, and I would love for you to go deeper into the idea of a contract, but going along this track of compliance, of fitting in, of belonging. I'm not suggesting, neither of us are suggesting that you can't belong or that you
no,
can't be part of the
no,
tribe or the
no.
people around you, but that when there is this discomfort and this kind of struggle that pops up in your life, we were talking about the jump last time we spoke, when there's this sort of voice that seems to be coming from nowhere, what is it responding to, and where has it been for this long, and why is it so dampened?
I think the voice, you start to lose it aged about 6.
Right.
Before you're 6, you're always asking questions, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're always,
Why? 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 Why?
why? And people are pretty nice to you as well.
Mm,
And they'll get down, good adults will get down to your level, right?
mm,
And your brother, our son's very good at that. He meets children at their level.
yeah.
The issue with the good girl, the good boy, and all these institutions, education, university, the job world, I'm not talking about work now, is
Mm,
that there is a big power difference. You don't have any agency,
yeah.
and so there's this power imbalance, and that what makes it feel terrible. So here's a tribe that you can belong to in an educational um, view. If you want to, we've got the builders in. If you want to be a plumber, you can go to plumber school, and you do. You have to get your piece of paper. But
Right.
really, you learn as an apprentice. So Martin has his apprentice when he was here yesterday, and uh, the apprentice is very valuable to Martin, who's a skilled plumber. And
Right.
there is a hierarchy, but it's a hierarchy based on skill.
Right.
And the apprentice is by working with alongside the master. In Quebec, they
Mm,
call him le maître, working alongside the master. The master is legitimately the master. She or
mm,
he has more skill, and
right.
she's transferring over time
Right.
through skill. At which some point, the apprentice will leave and start his own little node like that. Now we've throughout all history, apart from the last 100 years ago, that's how we learn stuff.
Right.
We learn stuff from someone who really knows what they were doing,
Mm,
in close company with them, provided. So Michelangelo starts in a studio mixing paints and,
right.
and paints the background, and then he's allowed to paint hands, and then one day he's going to be allowed to paint the face. But he's
Right.
been very but it's about, he is the apprentice.
Right.
There's a big power hierarchy, but the person in charge has earned that because they have the skills. In a school setting, university setting, in a work setting, most of these power positions are positional. You know,
Right.
they're not based on. They're based because the guy's won the lottery on that, getting that thing. But he or she may know much less than you.
Right. Right. And actually, I
Uh,
do.
and that's what's annoying. It's so annoying having some idiot tell you what to do.
Well, I mean, bringing it back to you, when you, I think personal stories are always helpful for you when you were leaving the system, making your own jump in your midlife. You were leaving these sort of difficult power
Positional
hierarchies,
power. Yeah.
and you started to look for becoming an apprentice or learning from someone where there was
Yes.
trust and there was
Yeah.
deep respect for the craft or whatever that
Yeah.
person was the expert in. What why how did you make that shift, and how did you, because I'm speaking
Yeah.
to people who are in
I've never. Yeah.
this
You just.
jump.
I just see it now. I just see. So I'm. One of my mantras is follow the person, and this
Yes.
now makes sense. So a year or so before I blew up and left the bank, I was phoned up by the chairman's office, and they said, Fraser Mustard is coming in to see the chairman, and he's suddenly got to do something else, and he's a bit of a crazy guy, and you're our most crazy guy. So could you fill in for the chairman and meet Fraser Mustard?
Let's get the two
The,
crazies together.
yeah, you'll get the two crazies together. Fraser Mustard is now the late Dr. Fraser Mustard, but he was one of the most intelligent, thoughtful people in the world, and
Mm,
he ran a think tank in Canada, and he wanted to come in and talk about various things at the bank. Well, when I went into the room with Fraser and his sidekick Dorothy, it was love at first sight.
mm,
It was the most romantic thing that's almost ever happened to me. I went, this is a man who I must get to know, and his life is the life that I want. And it was
right,
mutual.
right.
And I found a way of working. So whilst I was still working at the bank, I found ways of starting to work for him.
You
I
just
was helping him on
struck
some things.
on a really important point, which is when you're in this turmoil of change and you're not happy in where you're at, whether it's work or whatever relationships we're talking about, is feeling this struggle and it doesn't fit. So, your mantra of follow the people is interesting because when you start to see who excites you, who does light you up, where does your energy lift, and who are the people that
Yeah,
dampen it, that
yeah,
tell
yeah,
you all your ideas are crap, that
yeah,
you're crazy, or are judging you quietly and not sharing it.
yeah,
Pay attention to that,
yeah.
because it's not you, it's their stuff.
It's
But
them. It's their.
I
It's
think
their
it's
stuff.
really, really hopeful and also exciting in all this sort of messiness
Right.
is to pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Pay
And
attention to the people that stand out, even if you
and,
don't know them.
and they'll come. Because I'd never met him before.
No,
And it does happen if you think of romance, though. You're in a room and there's this person you've never met him or her before, and it's like,
chemistry.
and I think it should be like that.
Right,
Another person similar at the same time, because I think when you're ready, right?
right.
And I was negotiating to keep the banks out of some dreadful government thing. It doesn't matter what it is, but the enemy was this guy called Jim Thomas, who was a minister in the Ontario provincial government, a deputy minister, and I was getting nowhere. So in the end, I said, "Look, why don't we take the day off together, and we'll go off to this learning center that the bank had, and we'll spend the day,
Mm,
and we'll work something out." And it was the same thing. It was sort of we were on opposite sides of a major problem, but we kind of threw that out of the window because it was a love fest.
right.
You
You
know,
got to know each other and see each other.
we both found something in the other that we really wanted, and I learned a lot from him, and he learned a lot from me. And it's the same with Fraser. It's what the issue is. There was a It was more like this, and it would go like that. It would vary depending on what we're talking about. So some things I would be the expert,
Right.
which is what Fraser wanted my opinion on.
Right.
And in most cases, he would be the expert. But
So this brings,
you'd be the relationship would be shifting in
all the time.
power hierarchy.
Right.
It was really skills or value hierarchy,
Right.
not
Right.
power, not power.
Right.
Neither of us were using power
So
on
this
the
brings
other.
in, and we're talking a lot about work, but we have been exploring what are the ripple effects when you
Mm,
decide you need to jump or change something that's not working for you, or blow up your life, or completely just grow. Whatever it is, you are not the only one involved.
no,
You are intimately connected, to bringing it back to the earlier part of the conversation, you are intimately connected to all sorts of relationships who
yeah,
see you as you were before, who have stories of how they see you, of what they get from you, what they respond and like about you from that story. So if you go changing your story all of a sudden of who you want to be, or setting these boundaries, or saying no to the things that they're
yeah,
like, but I want that. And herein comes up this word, the contract.
yes,
And it's like, once you start seeing that you are in contracts with people all over your life, it's not a like you're in a prison everywhere. It's, oh my goodness, I see it.
because once you see the contract, you can have some empathy towards the other person. So if you just basically say, my wife, my husband doesn't understand me, so in the end, too bad, uh, that's not a very honorable thing, because they are attached to the
Mhm.
old you.
Mhm.
They want to see the old you, and there are expectations. There is a contract that you have with everybody. You have a contract with your children, which
Mhm.
changes as your children get older. You see, when when Hope is 9 and the perfect child, right? It's easy to be a benevolent father. When
Right.
Hope is 17, she's not the 9-year-old.
No.
And to expect her to be the 9-year-old and be disappointed when she's not, and angry with her when she's not, is
Yeah.
unfair. And
Yeah.
simply to lash out, which is what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And with your closest partner, you've been married or living with them for some time, they signed up to a
Yeah.
deal, a contract with you, and it has certain clauses that
Mm.
you've implicitly agreed to,
And you keep agreeing to,
and
with
you keep
being
agreeing.
get back to the good girl and compliance. You keep complying to them to make sure that you belong, and you keep
So
doing it. Yeah.
yes, so one day when you say no to a major clause, or maybe to a lot of them,
Right.
or then if you simply just say they're stupid or don't understand me and walk away, and you yourself get angry and then lash out back,
Right.
you're not going to help yourself or anybody.
And this is where
Uh,
the boundaries, for me in the last few years, just hearing a lot of the speak in the world of like, set your boundaries, be clear, tell people what you want. I think that's important.
yes, it
But there
is.
is a reciprocity in the
Yes.
contract that we have, where you may set your boundaries, but if you
What
don't give
about
them
them?
heads up that you're changing the clause, and they might not have any choice about it, then you're gonna have some resistance. So not only are you going through your messy stuff of changing or shifting or reevaluating your life, but you've got this whole load of resistance you're dealing with, and you're like,
Yes.
why is this so difficult? I feel like I'm climbing up a mountain. It's
Yes.
got to be easier than this.
Yes. And I think that's the set. Hope and I have been talking about this for the whole of the last week or so. And I think if you start to explore these implicit contracts, because first of all, you think, I don't have any contracts. We do. We have contracts with every single relationship that we
Okay.
have, and it's really worth thinking about them. And as well as thinking about clause 3b, the most important thing to think about is what's the purpose of this contract. So if we take something that we can
Now give me
all
an example.
that doesn't feel bad, let's
Yeah.
take our children's education. I mean, it can be bad, but it's not directly personal. So if you think of what's the purpose of the education contract, you think it should be about preparing your child to cope well in the adult world.
To
But
achieve
but
and
it,
to
but
be
it
independent and to thrive. Right.
right. But then when you look at the reality of it, you see it's the opposite. The real contract is we're going to teach your kid to be obedient. And there's no room for rebellion. I mean, Sophia, Hope's daughter, who's traveled extensively in Africa, when the teacher started talking about a country called, what was it, Hope?
Tanzania.
Tanzania. Sophia, aged what, 9,
Yeah.
puts her hand up and goes, actually, it's called Tanzania. Well, Sophia was right, but she broke the contract,
The
which
teacher was
is the
furious.
teacher is always right, right?
Yeah. They were
The
furious. She
teacher
came
is
home and
always
is
right.
yeah.
And
And
that's the contract of school. So if you think school is teaching your children to be independent minded and think for themselves and you get ready for the world, yes, they are in this way. They're teaching your children to be obedient so they can fit into the same system in university or the same system at work,
well, you're
which
right.
is not the same as being an autonomous person. They're
No,
teaching your children to be slaves.
well, I have to say, because we do have conversations, very open conversations with our children about this contract. We haven't said contract, but expectations to be obedient at school because our kids have been in all sorts of school settings, in the jungle, on the road, in the world, and then now in school classrooms, which they really enjoy, actually. And I'm absolutely not bashing schools and teachers, but I think they see it. I think even just having the conversations of what's
Yeah.
expected and saying, how are you? I think it's the same as, kids spending a lot of time just scrolling TikTok or scrolling social or us scrolling social media is how are we distracting ourselves or in these sort of binding contracts or distraction modes where we're not allowing our voice to come up?
Yeah.
So I'm telling Sophia and Alfie, how do you find ways to exercise your creative muscle? Knowing you're in the system, you're
Mhm.
going to be obedient. You don't want to be kicked out. They don't. Some other
Yeah.
kids do. And it's this fine balance of just being aware because you and
Yeah.
I are not saying, everybody jump out of the plane, everybody
No.
leave your work and leave school. It's just the awareness of, oh, yeah, there are contracts. And just
Yes.
the knowing is empowering for
I
whatever age.
I think that's absolutely bad, and I'm sorry if it just sounded like,
It's
I'm
okay.
recommending everybody jump out. I think Hope's got the secret sauce here is once you're aware of the contract, then you can actually start to find a way of using it, better for yourself.
Right.
And one of the decisions you can make is, for now, I'm going to just say yes to the contract, right? You can, and I'm going to do some things outside the contract that will, let's take our education, that will help me actually get to the bigger goal. And I think that,
Maybe you and we will renegotiate our contract. I
yeah,
think that
of
would be a
course.
very cool exercise.
Yeah,
This is the first time that I've lived close to you and my mother since I was a teenager. So coming home from traveling for so many years, I have openly shared that it's wonderful to be close to my family and to see you so regularly. It's also brought up a lot of the compliant little girl in me of wanting to please, doing things for you guys. Sometimes when it doesn't make sense or
yeah,
it's not necessarily a good thing, is to then try to find ways to, and I think this is happening with a lot of people in their midlife with their parents who are aging. The parents who are aging sometimes are either looking at their child as like a little kid and treating them like that, or the aged parents are now becoming more
The
childlike.
children,
And
absolutely.
so there's sort of angst and frustration and disappointment being felt by middle-aged children of like, why do I have to parent my child? This isn't a contract. The contract was
No,
you were supposed to take care of me and be in my
right,
corner, and now I have to take
right.
care of you?
Of you, yeah.
I
I
don't have
I
to
I
take
think
care of you yet at
no,
all, but
no, 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 but
it's
I
worthwhile
think
having that
but I think
conversation.
I think, you know, this idea of exploring the contract is itself a wonderfully liberating thing
Mm,
because we make these assumptions. And Hope shared an interesting piece earlier before we talked, David White talking about one of the most difficult relationships you have is with a teenage girl because the person you're working with or that's living in your house is you think she's still Hope at 9, and in families, let's take it the other way.
yeah.
You get this revert. You do. I'm 71. Most men who are 10 years older than me are significantly frail.
Mm,
Men tip around about
right,
80 or so, and they can't. Just it's a thing. Well, how do you? What's the contract?
right.
With
And you're
with this
also
person who was doing things for you, and now
right.
it becomes increasingly helpless.
Well, I
I
think we're
don't
both
have the
meeting.
answer, but exploring, but
Yeah,
wishing it wasn't true
there you
is
go.
one thing,
Yeah.
and exploring the reality is another.
Well, I do. I mean, we have a very open relationship and we talk about everything because we've worked at it. But I think it's for people who can't talk to their parents and can't reach them, how do they go about addressing this contract? How do they do it?
I I I don't know other than this. I think there's a bigger contract that we've all lost here. We When we think of families today in the West, we think of mum and dad and the kids. Well, even that doesn't exist very much. There's usually mum and the kids.
Mm,
But the family throughout millions of years has been multi-generational and quite big,
hmm
and it's designed as a social container to support harassed mothers with child rearing, which is labor intensive no matter what period of time you pick. And it also provides some security to the surviving older or less capable members.
mm,
And it might be worth, but it's but it's a contract based on reciprocity.
mm,
And I think that this idea of a one-sided in that the kids we today neotenize our children, and the risk for parents is that they look after their children as if they were 4 until they're 40,
hmm
and that's the extreme, right? And then we also make our increasingly frail parents into 4-year-olds as well,
right.
and we don't expect enough, and we say that he's really 4 and he needs to be looked after like a 4-year-old, and he can't do anything for himself, and he can't make a contribution. And I this idea that in the family it's a one-way street, which wherever it is the flaw. And so negotiating a reciprocal contract, how you do that, yeah.
I
A
have an idea.
reciprocal contract is where the health and the satisfaction and the acceptance comes.
I have an idea.
Okay.
I think our it's managing our reactions with perhaps a more intuitive path. I'll explain what I'm meaning. Is that often when we're going through shifts or change, or we want change to happen in our life, we focus on where we're frustrated and we build up walls or block. block the other person because you can't reach them. You don't understand where
Yeah.
they're coming from.
Yeah.
And our reactions pop up, and they're usually not positive, or
Yeah.
they don't create positive reinforcement. And it's going against this reaction and asking the person who you're in a contract with that you want to change, what would they like? I learned this, I think it was from my cousin Sarah, and she said the most powerful thing she could ever say to somebody she was frustrated with or trying to work something out is, in so many words, how can I love you more? And
Mm.
I think it's this opening to the fact that there is reciprocity, because when you're going through change, the people around you feel it. They just don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. So when
Yeah.
you open that channel and you ask them about them, then they can see you in a different way. And I
Yeah.
think that just opening that channel, I don't think that there's anything bad that can come from that. It could be, how could I love you more? Or what do you love about our relationship right now? Or what is working for you right now? And start
Or
with
what
that
do you need?
positive.
Or what do you
Yeah.
really need? What do you really need?
Because
The
it
I
starting with them is much more likely to have something shift than you going, I need this, or this is the boundary I'm setting. It
or
immediately
how
turns
does
up walls.
what I'm doing, I know I'm different, how does what I'm doing really, uh, hurt you? If
Yeah.
I could just close with with a real experience here. There was many years ago on PEI, there was a guy I knew, and in PEI, many people have, and let's put it this way, they're not that thin, right? And this guy was, very much a typical male islander, and he was probably 100+ pounds over his best weight. He lost the whole lot, right? And he looked like a completely different person. His family were horrified and 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 rejected him completely because and he was just abandoned. And I think had they explored you know how is my
Mm.
being fit and healthy and thin affecting you? And they might have said, well, it shows us up.
Right.
And you could have then explored that
Yeah.
feeling. You and you could have come to I think you could have come to some resolution.
Right.
But in fact, what happened, they rejected him. So he basically went, well, you too, you know, um, and you allow the anger of your reaction to dominate the conversation.
I will leave with this, which is, again, David White seems to be a voice that is ringing in a lot of people's ears and hearts. And he has a beautiful quote that I think is really related to what we're talking about in contracts, in making changes, in reciprocity. We can never know in the beginning, in giving ourselves to a person, to a work, to a marriage, or to a cause, exactly what kind of love we're involved with. When we deny ourselves a certain specific kind of reciprocation before the revelation has flowered completely, we find ourselves disappointed and bereaved. And in that grief, may miss the particular form of love that's actually possible, but that did not meet our initial and too specific expectations. David White. Thank you, Dad. I
Thank
really
you, darling.
appreciate you popping
Okay.
on more later. Happy Friday, everyone.
Bye bye.
Questions, please leave them in the Facebook post, and we look forward to more conversations. Take care.